so now that I've officially sort of welcomed you, the real welcome, up next with Professor Stephen Bluin, who's the head of the Wits Business School. And I'd like to...
Thanks, Amanda. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Wits Business School, I have great pleasure in welcoming you all here tonight. So, we're looking forward to a very interesting and lively debate on the topic of legislation to optimise oil and gas resources. So, discussions such as this evening's go hand in hand with our school's aim of providing critical thought on issues that are key to emerging markets. And we continue to provide a strong link between business, government, civil society and academic communities, as we are also known for our history of entering into strong relationships and partnerships with leading local and global institutions.
And for those of you who don't know, Maurice Radebe is the executive in residence for the Wits Business School and a group executive at Sasol. Of course, tonight he is strictly wearing his WBS hat.
Yes, I think that's very important. Thank you very much, Imam. Well, the reason we started this series of seminars is the passion that some of us have of our African continent. So many discoveries have happened, and I've said this before, and I'm repeating all the time because I want to really implant in your mind and in your hearts that it is so critical that we have policy positions about the oil and gas discoveries in this continent and making sure that it beneficiated here in this continent and making sure that it really makes sure that the economy of this continent is really helping all of us to be the best that we can be.
Mr. Andreas is the Chief Director of Mining Policy at the DME. He's going to be delivering that keynote in place of the Minister Susan Shabangu, and he may feel free to make any amendments he likes.
As you may be aware, the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Amendment Bill is currently before Parliament in the view of government and critical stakeholder representatives. The bill contains critical provisions aimed at the implementation and enforcement of the beneficiation strategy. These provisions will go a long way to ensure security of supply of resources essential for the country's energy needs. There is a need to augment the necessary legislative framework to optimize the socio-economic benefits derived from the development of South Africa's natural resources. This is especially so for the still to be confirmed shale gas resource, for which the Department of Mineral Resources has received a number of exploration applications in the Karoo Basin. After taking into consideration the developmental imperatives of the country, I placed a moratorium. When I say I mean the minister. I placed a moratorium on the granting of rights. This was precisely to ensure that we sufficiently capacitate ourselves with the necessary knowledge and skills to deal with this process in a responsible manner, having regard to the socio-economic and environmental imperatives of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to indicate that my department will soon be finalizing the technical regulations for petroleum resources, exploration and exploitation, to which prospective applicants will be subjected to in the licensing and actual exploration and production. The potential for shale gas to diversify the country's energy mix is immense and has the realistic opportunity to assist South Africa in achieving lower carbon emissions to ensure that we maintain our competitiveness in the global arena. As a country, we rely on you as academics to provide scholarly data to such discourse and change the minds of even the staunchest detractors who seek to stand against development that can advance the lives of those who've been marginalized and benefit South Africa as a whole. I thank you.
Let's get a view now from the regulator. Dr. Rod Crompton is a full-time member of the National Energy Regulator of South Africa.
South Africa imports all of its crude oil. It imports nearly all of its natural gas. It's a big drain on our balance of payments, oil and gas imports. And as you know, this economy has a balance of payments constraint. I believe we have the potential here to have the Witwatersrand Gold fields all over again in the history of our country, except it won't be gold, it will be black gold, which we call oil and gas. What it requires is astute policy and astute legislation, what in literature they call the intelligent state. And if we ever had a need to apply our maximum resources to a focus area, I would argue this is it. This is where we should be really piling in all the brain power that we can summons. In the upstream oil and gas industry, there's a basket of things which governments traditionally impose on the industry. Things like exploration fees, royalty fees, income taxes, signature bonuses, customs and duties, exchange controls, state participation, sometimes called free carries, empowerment of indigenous populations. All of those things, I'm just going to shorthand and call it the government requirements, that basket of goodies. And internationally, that basket of goodies can be light-handed or it can be not light-handed. So then the question is, what's the right balance of government requirements for our position at this point in our history? And what you can observe internationally is that governments who start with a light-handed basket in the frontier provinces, as they find oil and gas and they move towards the other end of the spectrum, the basket tends to get bigger and heavier. That seems to be the general principle all over the world. On the one hand, the minister's got to try to satisfy these investors and potential investors who she can't quite see, she can't quite engage with. On the other hand, she doesn't want us as a country to get shortchanged. There's a lot of argument in the public that historically we have been shortchanged on some of the minerals which we've had in this very wealthy, mineral-rich country we've had over the past 100 years. Let's look a little bit beyond that. Let's say we find oil and gas. What do we need? We need pipelines, loading facilities, and storage facilities. And people often don't see those things, but they're very important parts of infrastructure, because without those things, you can't move the oil and gas. It stays stuck in the ground, stuck in the well. So let's have a look at the regulatory dispensation as far as that's concerned, because when investors are looking at this, they look at the whole picture, not just the tax regime for oil and gas, but they look at the whole possibility for the whole industry. There's a thing called the National Energy Regulator, where I work, and the Petroleum Act, Pipelines Act, and the Gas Act are administered by this umbrella body. And it makes the decisions about how to administer these acts. What we can see then is 3 out of the 4 key pieces of legislation for this industry are currently under review. We must bear that in mind when we think about certainty and investor certainty. We can also say it's a golden opportunity to get all this stuff right. Because when investors come, they don't look at it as a petroleum law and a gas law and a NERSA law and all this. They look at the overall picture.
And so here's Professor Sunny Iyuke, who's head of the School of Metallurgical Engineering here at Wits.
Apart from refineries, what about the newly discovered blocks of oil and gas reserves? Who's going to bring the gas or the oil from the ground? Even when it is discovered, what are the engineers? What are the skills? People. So we came up with a topic we called an integrated approach to the skills requirements and development for the South African petrochemical industries. You realize that there's a great difference between the university engineers and the FET technicians. The FET technicians or the BTech students or the diplomas, when you give them spanner, they know how to turn it properly. But sometimes you give to the university master's degree engineers, sometimes it's like that. We have young people in the country, able people, looking for a job, looking for good education. Universities are there. We need to develop these skills for this sector. Exploration is coming up. Blocks have been identified. Where are the skills? You can imagine how much you pay to send a student to Crompton University to learn oil and gas engineering. It's huge. We have a relationship with those people, for example. We've planned to start our BSc engineering program in oil and gas next year. At first, we got, thanks to Cheetah, we got some money from Cheetah, and we were to send 2 students to Australia. Could you imagine in 2 years that would cost us 3.5 million? Now, university says, Sonny, you can't spend that money that way. Let's develop our curriculum. That is what we are doing now. But at the moment, we don't have the skill. We need to sit tight, because the discovery is coming, the oil blocks have been identified. I assure you, oil is there, gas is there. We don't have the skill. There are people looking for a job, and there are people that need education. Thank you very much.
No discussion on mining can ever be complete without the money, Mr. Radebe, am I right?
No, you're right.
So here's a business take on tonight's theme. Mr. Johan Thyse is the General Manager of Public Policy and Regulatory Affairs at Sasol.
We are well poised to be energy secure, but we are not. And why is that? And we need to look at those reasons. South Africa's energy and supply security is linked to the regions, and we are therefore proponents of the view that SA should focus on developing its own natural resources. It is an imperative, but we must do so in collaboration with the region where there are natural resources. The EIA's first predictions was as high as 485 TCF. The last time I've heard, they've revised it down to around 370. If there's only 10% of that volume of the latest prediction, it would amount to more than the SADC region's total current proven reserves of 21 TCF today. 1 TCF of gas will give us 18 gigawatts of gas-powered electricity powering 1 million RDP houses for 80 years. If you look at, and I think you'll agree, this is significant. And that's why our efforts in firming up what is going on in the Karoo and the shale gas potential is key for this country. As far as crude oil is concerned, the SADC has 11.1 billion barrels of crude oil. To give you an idea, 1 billion barrels of crude oil, from a South Africa perspective, and you just take the nameplate capacities of the South African crude oil refineries, it will keep us going for at least 5 and a little bit years. That's 1 billion barrels of crude oil. We have been unable as a region to find that common thread, that drumbeat that will make this regional partnership a reality. So from our perspective, we believe that regional partnerships will be key to develop a sustainable oil and gas industry. But I think, let me remind you that this has been done before. Go to Europe, it's been done there. Go to the US, it's been done there. And let's just take the US as a scenario. With the advent of new fracking technology in the US, shale gas brought about a liquid supply of gas. And there are now commentators who believe that the US will become energy secure by 2017, 2019. So by the time that the shale gas boom came along, infrastructure was in place. It was ready to transport more affordable energy to Americans with more than 11,000 delivery points, 1,400 interconnection points, providing for transfer of natural gas nationwide. More importantly, a total of 49 cross-border interconnections made possible through collaborative partnerships on a regional basis. The very reason why South Africa should give serious consideration to the further development of our regional gas partnerships. We believe that South Africa is uniquely positioned to take the lead. That's not me saying so. Everybody out there says so. But more importantly, we have a national development plan that is a perfect platform for us to take this from. Whether it is regional diplomacy, or whether it's the common singular vision that we see through the National Development Plan, we have something to bind us together to make this work. If we actually accept that energy is the catalyst to socio-economic development, and if we subscribe to that phrase, we will start understanding that energy, while it falls within the remit of certain key departments, it does transcend a number of areas. So therefore, from our perspective, we believe it requires a multi-government department task team approach with business and civil society.
You know, this is not just like the gold rush. This is the gold rush 10 times.
Yeah.
It really is an opportunity for this country to do things right in terms of the way we develop our oil and gas resources. And to pick up on what John said as well, we need a regional outlook. up to today, I think our government and business relationships are really constrained by the lack of trust. I think it's high time that, we realize that these resources, this potential we speak of, is not only in our part of the continent, it's actually all over the continent. So there is an element of competition as well. We must collaborate with our neighbors because we're linked, but there are other regions where the world will look to for these resources. So trust, I think, is key. We've got to be able to say, we're in this together. If we don't get this right, we're actually doomed. We'll remain a net importer, and we know what that does to our balance of payments.
That person said to me, we cannot declare that we trust each other if we walk out of this room. We actually have to work on it. And I think this is where we need to look at what are the commonalities that we have instead of focusing on the differences.
Imran, I would say we shouldn't be fixated on this question of whether it's one bill or two bills, one act or two acts. I mean, from the investor's point of view, do they really care whether it's in two pieces of legislation or it's two chapters in the same act? Does it really make such a big difference? What makes the difference is if it's clear, predictable, easily understood, it's efficiently administered, and if you have different chapters in the same act, you can have different tax regimes for infant industries and different tax regimes for mature industries. So to me, that debate is a bit of a red herring. It's a way of avoiding the really hard issues, which is what is the tax rate going to be? Because that's really, if I can summarize it down to its pips, that's the real issue. At the end of the day, you have a project, it has an internal rate of return, and if the government load on it is too heavy, it doesn't meet the hurdle rate, the investor says, bye-bye, see you another time. That's the real thing that we have to focus on.
We probably have a good example in the renewable energy sector, where there's been a lot of foreign investment in developing projects in that area. And you're quite right, there wasn't an obsession with how many rules there are. The question was, what are the rules of the program? And can we be certain? And that program has got very clear requirements, very clear rules, and we've seen, I think it's north of 50 billion rand coming into projects in the last 2 years.
I mean, from my experience of dealing with SADC countries on these kind of regulatory and industrial policy issues, it is extremely slow going. And if you're going to wait for agreement with the whole of SADC before you do something, well, many of us, it'll be our children who are going to be doing that. Take a practical project and make it happen. We had a situation where gas had been sitting in Mozambique since 1960. In 2000, Sasol came to government and said, we got the gas, we want to bring it to South Africa. How do we do it? There are no laws, there are no rules. What are we going to do? And there was a tough negotiation between the government and Sasol for 3 years, and a special dispensation was agreed, and the project happened. And now we are 10 years down the road. We've had 10 years of natural gas because we focused on the project. The Mozambican government were involved around a practical project. The South African government was involved also as a shareholder, and the private sector was involved as a shareholder. That's what history has taught us works. So let's do some more like it.
I'm a practical man. I want to get things done very quickly. Just give us 3 steps. Step number 1, number 2, number 3, to get this coordination going as quickly as possible.
Maurice, I think the first step to solve this regulatory issue is you've got to get the relevant ministers together to say we want to do this. Step 2, the ministers must appoint a task team of officials to do the practical work, and they report to the ministers to solve the political log jams, which will inevitably be there, but they can be resolved. And the third step is they must set a deadline for the completion of the task, and then it must go.
Is that you use the word environment only when you use the term enabling. What is your view on legislation relating to the environment? Because it seems that that is actually basically unimportant as far as the industry is concerned.
On the issue of the environment, so if you look at the regulations, Chapter 2 is dedicated to the environment. If you look at what the Cabinet memo and the directive we received from Cabinet is to make sure that the regulations are sufficiently augmented to ensure that we mitigate against the risk of potential risk to the environment and to natural water resources. So there's a whole chapter in the regulations dedicated to environment.
In closing, first of all, I'd like to thank you, everyone, for being here, for participating in this. And most importantly, I'd like to thank our panel. I think if we can all give them a great round of applause, I think they've done a superb job. I'd also like to thank our executive in residence, Maurice Radebe, for putting this together, not just tonight's session, but this whole series of sessions and this debate. I think this is so central to what we're trying to do at the Wits Business School, of fostering these debates and them being important issues. We promised important issues, and I think tonight has been a great example of that. So thank you very much for what you've done. Underpinning all of this, and I think why we have such a great chance of succeeding, something he said in his opening comment, is that we are all passionate about Africa. And for Africa's sake, let's get it right. Thank you very much.